Okay, hello. My name is Jerrod, and I am the host of the Attitude Series podcast. And it's 2019. We've just kicked off. We've had a couple great guests on from late last year, and this year kicking off for 2019. We've got our first guest for 2019. You know what? I'd like to sit here and say, this lady's got lots of accolades, but what I want to do is I've known her for quite a few years now, and she is a wonderful, wonderful person. Just to give you some stuff about her, she is a mom. She's a very proud mom. She's also she's a stepmother to two other children as well, and she's a wife. She works full-time in the health industry, health and fitness industry, and not only is she a running coach, she's also a personal trainer, and she's a nutritionist, a very good friend, and we're super happy to have her on board. We've got some great information that we want to cover with her today, but please welcome Solly Litchfield.
Thanks, Jerrod.
Hey,
best intro ever.
Best intro ever. And, we'll probably talk a little bit about, some of the stuff that doesn't define Solly, but Solly is also a top-ranked athlete. Before we got started here, I got a little bit of a giggle going because we were talking about some of the marathons that Solly has done. She's done over 18 marathons. She's done 4 at least ultra marathons, 50-kilometer, and she's also run a 100-kilometer marathon, which we went, couples went to New Zealand to run Tarawera, and she hadn't trained. She didn't even train for it, and she still smoked me in 100 Ks by at least 2.5 hours. So
trained a little bit.
Just trained a little bit. But super happy to have you here, Solly. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Excellent. How's your day been, by the way?
It's been good. Had some PT clients this morning, went for a run, went to work, and now I'm here.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, what I'd like to do just to kick off with the series today and just to talk a little bit more is let's take it back to the beginning. Let's take it all back, because what a lot of people see is Solly, and they see either on Facebook or they know you through Instagram or because you're super popular at events and running and all that. But if we go back to a little bit talking about childhood and where you grew up, where did Solly grow up, and just tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'm actually a Sydney girl, so I go for the Blues, which has probably just made 10 million people switch. I'm born and bred in Sydney, in actually North Sydney, Neutral Bay area, so a very affluent, yuppie North Shore girl kind of scenario. But my childhood was far from that. We didn't grow up with a lot of money at all. One of 5 kids, I'm the baby, 4 girls and a boy.
Wow.
I lived in the same rundown little home in a very, very well-off area for my first 19 years before I moved away. Beautiful place to grow up, super spoilt by opportunity. Even though it was tough in terms of my parents had no money, and that was a big challenge. I was still really fortunate to have many, many opportunities afforded to me. Yeah. Right.
And being the baby. Tell me about being the baby. Like what was the difference in age between the 5 of you?
So there's 10 years between me and my elder sister, so which is, fairly jam-packed. I do think I was a mistake. I was about 4 years after the last one. So the rest of them are all quite close in age, and then there's a 4-year gap between my sister Guinevere and I, or almost 4 years. Yeah, so it's sort of me, then 3.5, 4 years later her, and then the rest of them are all quite close within sort of 1 to 2 years of each other.
How much love, now when I say this, how much love's in the family? I know I've got 3 other siblings myself, and we're all 2 years apart, and I know as kids we probably didn't get on that well, and it wasn't until later on in life that we actually started to bond and actually be able to say I love you. You know? Was there a lot of love in your household?
Look, my siblings and I, we would actually do anything for each other, I believe. We are all very strong personalities. We're all very different. But at the end of the day, I think no matter, even if we hadn't spoken for 2 years, I think we would do anything for one another. There is a really strong underlying sense of loyalty and love. We're not an affectionate family. We're not the type of family that flatter each other a lot or pump each other's tires. We didn't grow up in that kind of environment. It was almost like a self-deprecating kind of environment in many ways. But because my parents didn't have a good marriage, I think, you know, even though we fought like cats and dogs when we were kids, you know, there was that sense of like we need each other, we'll rally together to go get through hard times. And, you know, we have been through hard times as a family, but also in our own individual journeys and lives. And we certainly have been there for each other when it's counted. We've had, all of us at different points have had times where we've struggled in the relationships and even years where we've probably not spoken well or very much at all. But we always come back to each other. Yeah.
That's fantastic. So when you talk about hard times, was it in terms of financial hard times, or was it in terms of the family, you know, just the initial relatives? I mean, how?
My parents didn't have, you know, they didn't have a good marriage for many reasons. Like financially, yes, they were under a lot of pressure. In the 80s, you know, interest rates were terrible for homes, and my dad was a lot older than my mum, like 25 years older than my mum.
Okay.
So he was 61 when I was born. So by the time I came along, he was kind of getting close to retiring and just doing casual teaching. He had been a professor at Sydney Uni and very academic parents. You know, my mum was a teacher as well, and that's sort of how they met. But, you know, the age difference, I certainly think, played havoc to their relationship. And my mum grew to sort of resent him and was quite bitter. And there was a lot of fighting, a lot of unhappiness. But because there was no money, you know, mum had to go back and work. She got 5 children. You know, that creates a whole other element of stress.
Right. Absolutely. And I know too, and hearing some of those similarities, it's challenging. It's challenging for kids in particular because they don't know how to deal with that. You know, mom and dad are doing their thing. I mean, I grew up in that household where mom and dad did fight and things happened because of financial reasons and all that. And it was always easy to go run off I didn't have any strategies myself, but in terms of some of your strategies being, you know, if your dad was 61 when you were born, wow. What were some of the strategies that you dealt with in terms of how did you overcome getting through some of these moments?
I didn't do very well through primary school. I was quite rebellious and I played out a fair bit because I guess my siblings had some years before the fighting got really bad, and by the time I was born there was no sort of childcare afforded to me, so I was home and right until I went to primary school and home with my mum and dad, just fighting every single day and kind of pretty crazy verbal abuse and all sorts of other things that any 3-year-old should not witness.
Right.
And it was every day. So I think by the time I got to primary school, I really was not equipped. One, I hadn't socialised with other kids. I hadn't gone and done that sort of pre-prep type thing that we encourage our children to do today. I had no socialising skills. And 2, my normalcy of like 2 adults interacting was, you know, just aggressive. Like all I remember really outside of that was, you know, my mum's hostility toward my dad and just how much she hated him. And so I was quite scared of her, and my dad was the more calm one. So it was sort of like different to what we often think that in that sort of situation it's going to be the male that's going to be more violent or aggressive. But for me it was the other way around. So I took a little bit of solitude and solace, I guess, with my father, and I found him comforting and safe. But my relationship with him wasn't encouraged and my mum really ruled the roost. She had the power, she had the influence. And so the older I got, the harder it was to be close to my dad. And it was it was encouraged to treat him poorly. And so my other siblings, they had that as well. But because I had those initial years on my own at home, and then they all left home as soon as I finished high school, and then I had my last years of high school at home alone again, still with my parents, living at opposite ends. My experience of it was different to theirs. We've all got our own story within the same family.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I've learned over the years is this is my perception and this is my reality, but some of my siblings would listen in and be like, well, that wasn't exactly the same for me. And that's okay, we lived different journeys within the same family to an extent. But I acted out, but thankfully I loved little athletics. So I think, and my dad took me to athletics, and that was one of the things that got me through and stopped me from being too much of a rat bag. Yeah. I could beat all the boys, and I did really well as like a runner and cross country through primary school. And I played piano and violin. I came from a very musical family. My mum did sacrifice, even though she was quite I guess I don't like using the word aggressive, but that's how it felt, and that's what it was for me. She was very self-sacrificial. She didn't say I love you, but she put every single penny she earned into giving us opportunities, and that was her way of saying I love you. And so we did ballet, we did piano, violin, and running, and so I had a lot of extracurricular stuff going on, and that was a massive godsend. But by the time I got to high school, I had really low self-esteem, very lost in myself, tended to gravitate toward the wrong type of people, and I really struggled to find friends and find my place in high school. And I think the thing that got me through and changed me in that chapter of life was I actually joined a church, believe it or not, and I went to a youth group. One of my sisters went and invited me along, and that completely changed my life. So I'm not involved in that so much anymore, but I'm so grateful for it.
Do you think it was the people there?
Yeah.
And by the way, thanks for sharing all that. I mean,
no,
it's all good. So do you think it was because I'd like to touch upon that point for a second. Do you think it was the people there, or was it the message that was being delivered, or did it just feel like a different environment where you felt maybe protected, or you felt like you had a tribe?
All of the above. I think, I went to this youth group, and there were people, the leaders there were in their early 20s, and so accepting, non-judgmental, and made me feel really safe, and that I could open up about my family without the fear of judgment, because through school I didn't want anyone to know what went on at home. I was really ashamed. I was ashamed of my dad's age. I was I lived in constant fear of judgment and not being good enough. And because we grew up in a family where, it wasn't like, I love you, I'm proud of you, good job. It was always, I've always felt like I wasn't enough, had to push harder. And I always compared myself to my siblings, who were incredibly academic and very talented. And I never thought I lived up to scratch. I just had this terrible self-deprecation kind of going on, I guess.
Where did that stem from?
Gosh, I think that just goes right back to the beginning of what I witnessed, and just not getting those basic fundamentals that every child needs of feeling safe and feeling loved, and just those words, I love you, you are enough, good job, I'm proud of you, not hearing them, even though I'm sure both parents thought them and felt them. They were so caught up in their own internal struggles, financially, marriage, that wasn't communicated. And yeah, so I think if you don't get that from a very young age, you're trying to just find your own sense of self and security, and yeah, and you're too young. You don't have that abstract thinking.
It's tough, isn't it? I'm sitting here, I was thinking earlier, you know, when, like they say, like a child's brain is 50% developed by age 4.
Yeah.
And like 80% developed by age 10.
Yeah.
So most of this development's all happening at such an early age that your behaviors and everything are really printed right there on the map, the map itself.
Yeah.
So, and what you were saying earlier is saying that, you know, maybe your mom, you were probably a little fearful of mom, but dad, you were more attracted to him because he was there to help or assist or all that. You know, interesting, you know, one of the things that you had told me earlier is that you lost your dad when you were 19.
Yes. Yeah.
And how did that affect you, knowing that you probably had a strong bond with him at that point?
Yeah, it was really hard because through my adolescence, I really pushed my dad away because that's what we were modelled as children, and that's what we were, I guess, encouraged more than anything to do. Having a strong, close relationship with my dad really wasn't an option if you wanted to stay under that roof.
Right.
And so when Dad passed away, there was a lot of sense of, I felt responsible in some ways, and I felt like so much regret, so much, if only I'd been stronger, stood up for what I really felt should have been communicated to him, if only I hadn't been so hard to him. But one thing I remember is he said to me one day, like, I know you love me, like, it's okay, I know. And I'll never forget him saying that, because I guess those words, because for at least 10 years after he died, I struggled a lot with, so much. I was coming to terms with it for so long, and I would remember those words every so often, and that got me through a lot. But also there were people in my life, particularly from the youth group, that met my dad and knew of more of what I experienced at home, who reassured me and had more maturity than me, had more life experience than me, and helped me see that this wasn't my fault. I was just a kid, it's hard.
That's a tremendous amount of pressure to put on a young one.
Yeah, and I grew up very quickly because my dad actually had a mental illness. So he, in some ways I felt like I lost him before I lost him. So my year 11 and 12 of high school, my dad had been diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, and I had become the object of his obsession. I was the only child living at home, and Mum lived at one end, he lived at the other. And he had to fend for himself. Mum didn't cook him food. He really wasn't allowed to be a part of our family unit. That was my normalcy. At Christmas, he had to stand in a corner, and by a certain year, he wasn't even allowed to stand in a corner and be a part of it. It was just, but that was the way it was.
What were you doing during this? What were you? I mean, you were wanting to jump in and help out. Were you just?
I think I was too dictated by fear. You don't know any different, and that's what you're modelled. And I think you just know inside, like, that there's nothing you can really do to change the way things are. Being the youngest too, you don't have a strong voice.
What were the other siblings doing during this time?
My elder sister was very close to my mum, and she really modelled my mum's sort of behaviour and followed her and was quite protective of my mum. My brother sort of is the next one down, and I think he just sort of, being the guy, got away with floating and not being as involved to some extent. And then my sisters, like my middle sister really struggled because she was a little bit like me and had a strong relationship with my dad. But she stood up to my mum more. And she had more of a fallout with my mum as a consequence. And then my sister Guinevere, I think she struggled. She was a little bit more like myself and sort of took a lot of the negative emotion of what we were going through, what we were living through, what we were experiencing, and projected that onto my dad because he just took it. He would let us yell at him. He would let us put it on him and didn't really push back. Wow. And in hindsight, I think, before he, got really unwell, I think he just probably knew that it wasn't, we didn't mean it. Like, it was just coping, and I'm sure he had the intelligence to understand that there was a lot of frustration, and he just received, which, I beat myself up for years about some of the things I would say to him and the way I would push him away and yell and project all that like emotion because I didn't know where else to project it. I didn't know what else to do with it. But unfortunately for him, he copped a lot of it.
Wow. Wow. And moving beyond that, say we've just, when did you finally leave the Sydney area? When did you break loose as Miss Independent? And
pretty early.
Yep.
Yeah. So I worked really hard I turned my life around a lot in high school, worked really hard, and actually realised I did have a brain and that I could apply myself and do well in my studies as well. And I worked really hard to actually get into College of Fine Arts, which is like a division of New South Wales Uni. I really wanted to, I was quite good at art, and I wanted to do something with art. I thought, I wanted to be an artist, but like, how do you, that's a tough gig. It's like trying to become a runner, isn't it? But even harder. But so I thought I'd go with graphic design, yep. Interior design, because I loved that. So worked really hard, got into that. And then things with my dad were tough, so I decided to defer for 12 months and stay at home for one more year after school. And he was in and out of like a psychogeriatric ward, and obviously like school finished and I was a bit messed up. So I just went and worked full time in a jewellery store. But by that time I was actually dating one of the youth ministers from the church.
Right.
Yes. So
I like how you said from the church.
From the church. So this is one thing that not very many people know about me, and I would say up until about 2 years ago, I kept it as a big secret because I was so ashamed of this part of my life, because I married him when I was 19. So he was my first love, and he, is a great man, and he knew me from when I was about 15 and was my friend, and knew my dad, and actually went to school with my brother coincidentally. Yeah. But yeah, I guess you look back and you think, gosh, classic example of young girl. He was almost 8 years older than me, made me feel safe, secure and loved, and like, let's run away, get married, and everything will be fine. Completely naive. And we did sort of run away, not really, but he got a job up in a place called Maclean near Yamba, right. Northern New South Wales, and we decided to take that job, and so I never ended up going to COFA. I went and did a distance ed degree instead in environmental science, so I could move away. And I married him when I was 19, and 5 weeks later my dad died. So the last day I saw my dad was my wedding day to him. And then we'd moved from Sydney, and I had this really gnawing, nagging feeling that something wasn't right with Dad. He was by this stage on his own in Sydney, and my mum had parted ways and moved to the Blue Mountains. Yep. And I just felt like something wasn't right. And I rang him, and a couple of weeks after I got married, and said, right, I'm going to come down to Sydney. And I called one of my sisters, said, I'm going to come down feel like I need to see Dad. And I'd organised it for a couple of weeks, but he died in the middle week before I'd got down there. So that was, you know, pretty full on. And I just got married. I was only just 19. Moved away from all my family, all my friends, and then I went through this massive, like, grieving sort of period without a lot of emotional intelligence, without a lot of maturity. I say I grew up fast, but I also think I was still such a kid, and there was a kid in me that never grew up. So, you know, I had no coping strategies or mechanisms to deal with some of the stuff that came up for me. Started seeing a counsellor, you know, and Mike was great, but I just didn't know how to manage being in a relationship and going through all that stuff. And
it sounds like a whole lot to take on board. And at the same time, I mean, your secret's out now.
Yeah.
Your secret's out now. But,
Yeah.
so, you know, somebody like being 19 and your husband, I would think that he was doing his best by you to be able to help you get through and understand what was going on at the same time.
Yeah.
He was your backbone at that point?
He was. I mean, he struggled, you know, to know how to best support me. And, you know, ultimately I pushed him away and just was like, I can't do this. As soon as it felt tough, I was like, oh, I don't know how to deal with us being not in a good space. Like, that means we're over. Like,
right.
No understanding that relationships can go through really hard times and that you actually can work through that and come out the other side. My understanding was, you have an argument, I'm going to end up like my mum and dad. So I
because that's your experience, right? That's, you know, you see that happen, you see that it's too tough, I'm out of here.
Yeah. So I ran.
I ran,
and he sort of, like, in a way, waited for me to sort my shit out for about a year. And it took me a bit longer than that. So by the time I sort of came back around and was like, oh, hey, I'm really sorry, I actually still really love you. He'd moved on. Fair enough too. But we remained, he never blamed me. He was actually very forgiving and understanding. A lot of other people blamed me, a massive falling out and away from the church. And that was, you know, really hard. But
sounds like a rare experience, though.
Yeah.
19, going through that, losing a parent, losing your father, all those circumstances piling up.
Yeah, it was just classic example of, like, a girl in her early 20s just having no idea who she is, and doing everything the hard way. You know.
So at that stage in your life, where was your outlet? What was Solly doing to help Solly?
At that stage, I was working in hospitality. I had stopped doing my degree. I discovered alcohol. So I was probably drinking a bit too much, working. And sleeping around a little bit, doing all those terrible things that you do when you're in your early 20s. Very lost. And then I had a really bad experience with a couple of guys one night when I was drunk, got completely taken advantage of, and it threw me for six. Like, I just, essentially just,
Was that a moment where you just said, enough's enough, I got to do something about it? This is the moment where I need to create some new strategies. I need to figure out where my next chapter lies.
Yeah, I came very close to just taking my own life. Like, I was so dark and so depressed, particularly after that happened. And I decided to book a trip to go to Europe. I'd saved up some money, and my elder sister actually came with me for the first month, and then I did a bit on my own. And that was sort of like, I just sort of stopped drinking, stopped going out as much. I was working in retail, but still really lost because I never finished my first degree. But I thought, no, just go overseas. And just before that, I actually went overseas. I met Craig, who is actually my daughter's father.
Yep.
And we started dating. He had a son at the time who was only two, sorry. And he was just a very quiet, sort of modest guy, played soccer and very safe, complete contrast to some of the people I'd been with. And we started dating, but then I thought, no, I'm still going to go overseas. So went overseas, came back, sort of went through that awkward, like, are we together, not together stage, and then ended up together. And
how old were you at this point?
23.
Yeah.
Yeah. And at the end of that year, I decided you need to go back to uni and pursue something you're really passionate about. Through all of these years, I always loved running. So as a kid, I was good at little athletics. And then even in year 11 and 12, even though I didn't compete or anything anymore, I would still just get up and go for a run, or like get up and skip for 30 minutes just as mental health more than anything. And so I decided to go and study something about exercise and about health. I was interested in nutrition. And so that's when I went and did exercise science and nutrition, and I would commute to Lismore. I stayed living in Yamba. That's where Craig lived and his family. And through that degree, I made some great friends, and it gave me a sense of identity and purpose again. And I did change my life again.
Yeah.
Entered a new chapter. And Craig and I, we had Arabella when I was 25, so almost 26. And like, that wasn't planned. But, the best thing for sure that ever happened to me.
We see Arabella, we see her on Instagram,
Yep.
or we see her on Facebook, and
Yeah.
and she's taken after mom too. She's obviously a talented runner.
She's more of a talent. She likes running, but she loves dancing. And I grew up dancing as well, but running was probably up there a little bit ahead of dancing, and she's the other way around. But yeah.
Fantastic. So Arabella comes on the scene. Right?
Yeah.
And then that obviously probably created a whole nother shift in your responsibilities.
Yes.
Or what you want to do, or the fact that you're a role model
Yes.
for this little being that's just shown up on the planet.
Yep.
Is that right?
That's right. And I actually took to parenting really naturally, surprisingly, because I was like, oh gosh, I've got no idea. But
is anything going to be better than what you experienced yourself?
Yeah.
Right? Maybe if you just say the opposite of maybe what I experienced, and then I'm gonna come out a shining star on the other side.
Well, that's definitely a motivation. But she was a very easy baby. I was incredibly lucky, just that I was that annoying mum that had a kid that slept through from really early on, and I could take her anywhere. I still had a bit of my degree to finish. I would take her with me. She would sit in my lap in the little baby bajorn in the back of lectures. She was a dream, and she was just so adaptable, could sleep anywhere, all that stuff. So I was very lucky. Someone was looking after me. It was an amazing first year with her, so much so that Craig and I decided to get married. He asked me to marry him when she was about 1 or so, and we got married, and we decided to move to Brisbane. His son is 6 years older than Arabella, and was living up here with his mum, and we wanted to be closer. And I'd finished my degree, and he had a work offer. He's in real estate, and I knew I would have more opportunity up here. So then began my Brisbane chapter of life.
There you go. And Brisbane has been a good chapter for you.
10 years this year.
Is it? Congratulations being here. You're a Brisbaneite now.
Yes.
Yeah,
well,
so
never.
you still go for the blues, but this is maroon country. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we're not hanging out at the next Origin party, by the way.
No.
So one of the things that we had talked about too, which I think is important, and it seems to be for people out there when they want to become successful or they attach themselves, there's mentors or people that they are highly influenced by. Who have been some of your greatest mentors or people that have influenced your chapters as they keep unraveling?
Yeah, I feel like there's been many lives rolled into one, but as an adolescent, the best mentors I had came from the church I went to. Some of those women there were just so nurturing and kind, and just took me in and showed me what love looked like.
Yeah.
And then some of the people within the youth group showed me what friendship looked like. And through high school, my closest friends came from that youth group. And, that was where I felt free to be me, and a bit more accepted and a bit more confident. But yeah, that my first true mentors came from the youth group and the church, and I'll be forever grateful for some of those women. I don't know who I'd be without them.
Do you still keep in contact with any of those people?
I actually reconnected on Facebook with one of them just last year, and I was so thrilled that I found her, or she found me. I can't remember. Her name's Ali, and yeah, little would she know how much she influenced me positively. She used to meet up with me once a week for a couple of years and just have me over for afternoon tea, and then there were a couple of others as well that did the same, just accepted me, and I didn't accept me. So to have people that did was just, and such good natured people.
Well, there you go. And so when we first met, I have this vision. I met you through Nicole.
Yes.
Right? And I remember, and I can't even remember where the house is, but I just remember being up on the top floor, meeting you for the first time. And you had Arabelle with you, and you at the same time, I think you might have been recently divorced. So this is how many years back?
Yeah.
And just going through a whole nother chapter in your life, which you're probably trying to unravel and then go, I got some new strategies. I'm working on something new. It didn't work out, didn't pan out, but now, never ever quitting. That's I guess there's something, you're not a quitter.
I'm not a quitter. Yeah. And through all the things I've lived through, I built quite a strength and resilience, and better understanding of who I am and what I will and won't put up with, because particularly through my 20s and early 30s, I just always placed myself underneath people, that everyone is automatically more important and better than me. I'm not worthy. I've always had this sense of I'm not worthy of love, I'm not worthy of good people, and I have to earn that friendship, or I have to earn that relationship and give whatever they need. And that's led me to make some really poor choices in my life. And I look back and just think, far out, I can't believe I did that, or allowed that person to use me so much, or whatever it might be. But through it all, I think I've had some level of intelligence to kind of navigate my way through that in a very twisted, unconventional way, but I've got there eventually. And, I can finally say, I am worthy and I am enough, and I, this is who I am. I have been married 3 times, and that won't define me. And if someone else wants to define me by that, or judge me for however many partners I've had or whatever, then let them, at the end of the day. But I defined myself by that. I was ashamed of that right up until probably 2 years ago. couldn't shake those that sense of I'm such a failure, like
Well, you have a website. It's called In Sully's Shoes, right? And you've gone out there and you've shared what you're sharing today.
Yeah.
I mean, you're putting it out there, as you say, very unapologetically. You. And I think that's fantastic, because there's that sense of vulnerability by being able to do that. And people that are not your true friends, it doesn't really matter. They can go by the wayside, but people that are, they're still going to be there for you. They're, same thing with family as well.
Yeah, it filters them out. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And you know what? Third time lucky.
Yes. Yep.
John Egan. Nice man, huh?
Yeah.
Always give him a hug every time we see him.
He's a good egg.
Yeah. So, so obviously he's bounced into your life, which has brought a couple other joys. Yeah. Literally bounced in. You guys met obviously through the running scene. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's been another tribe. That's been another group that you've attached onto as well.
Yeah, more recent years. So, like I said earlier, I've always run and kept a level of fitness, because it's just been really good for my mental health more than anything. But after Arabella was born, I decided to do a fun run, and I did like the 10K at Gold Coast when she was about 7 months old. Had no idea. I didn't have a watch. Was just like, let's go for a run. This is fun, and finished. I was like, oh, is that a good time? I don't know. And a few friends were like, oh, that's a good time. Maybe you should run more. And I got a bit of a bug and did some half marathons after that. And my first marathon in 2009 at Gold Coast, and still didn't run with a watch. Still had no idea really. Just sort of ran.
But dynamic results, great results.
Yeah,
I know you're chasing.
Which came from joining a club, I would say.
Yeah. And it's great, because everybody's got to have something that they're involved with.
Yeah.
And I know you're still chasing that sub 3 hour.
Yes.
And you're teetering on it, right? It's just, it's almost there.
Yeah, I think one thing I've learnt with running is so mental. I think the last couple of years I've been through a lot of change, and John and I have taken on a lot. We coach now as well, and our kids are at a really busy age. And as much as we still train, you've got to emotionally, mentally be ready to take on a challenge such as a sub 3 marathon. And I've always sort of felt like I've been half there in my training in the last sort of couple of years, because I've been spreading myself so thin. So I've put in a lot, but I think, I've learned and accepted that you're going to have to take some things out of your life if you want to achieve something like that, because it's not just about physically getting out there and doing the training. You've got to believe it. You've got to sleep more. You've got to, you know what I'm talking about.
I totally hear you. I mean, whether I spoke about it last time or not on our podcast, is New Year's Eve, Nick and I made a resolution between now, because we're signed up to do a 100K run, and we decided to go alcohol-free between now and May 18th. Mm-hmm. So it's, 20 days, no booze in the system.
Well done.
So that's, as you get older, this, you get older, you don't recover as fast. So it is tough. It is seriously tough. So in terms of running for this year, 2019, is there anything exciting that you got on the books that you...
Well, I'm actually enjoying a little bit of a change at the moment, doing a bit of track stuff, just working on my speed.
Yeah.
John and I have taken a few things off our plate this year. We're sharing our coaching with a couple of other coaches a bit more, freeing up our time a bit. So I actually feel a little bit mentally more ready to sink my teeth in and give it a good red hot go this year, as opposed to the last couple of years. I feel pretty fired up with running at the moment.
Right.
Yeah.
I like hearing that.
Yeah.
So there's a bit of passion.
There's a bit of oomph in me, and it's quite funny because I have no idea what I'm training for. I'm just training, but I'm loving training. So I guess at the moment my focus is just to keep loving training, build my base, I'll probably focus more on the 10 and half marathon distance in the first half of the year. And if I can get those times down to where I want them and to what I know I need them to be at to do a sub 3, then I might give a sub 3 crack at the end of the year. So I just.
And would that be in Melbourne?
Well, funnily enough, I have a bit of a soft spot for Melbourne.
Right. How many times Melbourne?
This year will be my 8th one in Melbourne in a row. So I have this sort of silly little thing where I want to do 10 in a row in Melbourne consecutively. I just love the vibe down there. Obviously, it's where John and I began our love story. But even before that, I loved it. I do love Melbourne as a city. I love that race. I feel like the whole city comes behind the marathon and sort of shuts shop and gets out there on the streets and cheers you on.
And it's a fast course? When you say fast course, it's a relatively flat course?
It's funny. It's actually nowhere near as flat as Gold Coast
right.
or Sunny Coast. But because the scenery changes a lot, I feel like it goes quicker. And I actually think having a few little undulations and stuff gives your legs a bit of a rest at different points. It's certainly a little bit more downhill the first half, and the second half a little bit more uphill, which creates a little bit of a challenge. But
but the weather,
the weather is
that's
except last year.
Right.
That was horrendous.
What happened last year?
It was really hot.
Okay.
Like crazy hot and windy. So last year was not pleasant, but normally it's great.
Fantastic. Yeah. I haven't done it yet. Would I like to do that one? That would be fun. I'm sure it would be fun.
Come and do my 10th with me.
Okay. Yeah. All right. And did we get that on the podcast? Yeah. Come and do the 10th one. That might be one where Nick and I train for and see how we go. We'll just use the foundation of what we're currently doing right now and show up and.
That's it.
Yeah, that would be awesome. So, Solly, you're coaching, you're doing the training, you've got your blog out there as well. You've got ways in which people can contact you, reach out. And by the way, thank you for sharing your story today. And how do like the people that be listening, how do they get in contact with you? How can they reach out and say, I'd like to be able to pick up either some of your plans, your programs, your coaching, your training? How do I reach out to Solly?
Well, they can go to info@sollyshoes.com.
Nice. Info@Solly's
Which is
Shoes.
my email.
Yeah.
Or, they can find me on Instagram. I'm just Solly_Litchfield. They're the two best ways, email or through Insta or the website, which is sollyshoes.com. So one of those means can reach out.
Awesome. Are you also on Instagram too, or you on any of that stuff? Do people follow you?
People follow me on Insta, which is Solly_Litchfield.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Facebook and
Strava to find out what she's up to.
Yes, what crazy session I've done.
Awesome. Well, I just want to say thank you for coming in. It's been a real treat. Appreciate you coming onto the Attitude series. Is there anything that you'd like to wrap up with and share with our wider audience, and any piece of advice moving forward into the future?
Piece of advice. Don't apologize for who you are, I guess. That's my motto in the last sort of 12 months, is just own the shoes you walk in. Hence why I created Solly's Shoes. I'm like, that's where it came from, really, is just like, this is who I am. These are my stories, and I can either be a victim to my stories and be, oh, woe is me. It wasn't smooth. It was tough, and I've made some kind of questionable decisions along the way, or I can say, hey, these are my stories. Like, there are other people out there that can go, oh, I relate to that, so I'm not alone. And what did she do to help her get where she is and come out of that and be stronger? And we can always turn the chapters around. And if I look at my life, I often look back on some of the chapters, even from a few years ago, and I don't even relate to that girl anymore. But when you're a mum...
Which is great.
Yeah, right? It is. I guess that shows that we're learning and we're growing, and I hope that keeps happening. And I've got, a great man by my side, and the right man by my side to help me on that journey, and that's lovely. But I also know I can do it on my own as well, and I think it's important in life to know who you are enough to be able to stand on your own two shoes and not be reliant on anybody. It's great to have somebody, but don't let them define you, because otherwise your happiness is going to be dependent on other people. And I learnt that the hard way. But being a mum definitely helps me stay on track and keep me in check, because my number one thing in life is to be a good role model to her and make her feel loved.
Awesome.
Really.
Awesome. Thank you, Solly. And in 2020 Melbourne, we'll see you there.
Yes. Oh, that's my 40th as well. So
sounds like a party.
It's going to be a party.
Sounds like a party.
Yeah. Thanks, Jerrod.
Awesome.